to our podcast. Anna and I are here with Maggie Mellon, who is an independent social worker. She's a writer, a talker, and has a lot of experience in social work, obviously. Has been around for many, many years and has agreed to come and talk to us today about gender identity in schools. So, Maggie, would you like to introduce yourself and say a bit about you?
Thanks, Mary. I think you've done quite a good job of it. I'm long-time qualified social worker. I worked in councils in statutory work, but stopped that a long time ago. Worked in the voluntary sector for a while, and for the last 13 years I've been working independently, both pro bono and also as an independent social worker in terms of reports to court, whatever. And as you said, I mean, I have, as well as practicing social work, I have written quite a lot over the years, and I have got a website if anybody's interested, which has got some of my writings on gender and sex and children, and also about the named person scheme, which was something that I also spoke and wrote quite a lot about when it was on the cards. So yeah, so that's me.
Give us a plug then for your website.
Oh, the website's just maggiemellon.com, so it's easy to find. If you just Google my name, up it comes, and you can go into it. It's not very well curated, but it's got lots of, whenever I remember, I put up articles that I've written. So the first one that I wrote on the gender thing was in 2018, and I had been increasingly concerned and actually quite unbelieving about what was being said and taught and accepted about the claims about children and sex and gender. And I couldn't make sense of it. And then I think the guidance on transgender children in schools came out. That was either the prod for me to do it. I think it probably was. Anyway, I just sat down and wrote an article for the Herald saying what my concerns were and how risky and dangerous I thought some of these beliefs were for children. And it got published. And actually, we were on holiday at the time. My husband and I were on holiday, and it came out in the Herald, and he was, I mean, the kind of threat around talking out was so high that I was a bit worried. He was worried. He said, I hope we're not going to go home and find our windows panned in or whatever. And I didn't think we would. But you do have that fear about speaking out because people were being threatened. You read about Julie Bindel and, other people at that time who'd spoken out. There was a lot of threat around don't dare speak about this. So that's a red rag to a bull for me. So I was like, don't tell me not to, I will be right. So I wrote it and actually got a lot of positive responses from women. A lot of people just going, oh, thank goodness somebody said this or written this. We can't believe it. Or other people just going, that can't be right, So that was the start of my engagement. People contacted me, and then I was invited to speak at a meeting that For Women Scotland was putting on along with other speakers, and that really I've not been stopped being involved since then, really, in trying to raise the alarm about what's going on.
So do you think in that time there's been, I mean, this is maybe kind of going a bit further ahead than we probably should, but I mean, I remember 2018 being quite pivotal for me as well in terms of my understanding and just disbelief at what was going on. And can you see in the time that there's been between 2018 and now any change or any progress in terms of that, or is it?
Well, I think more parents, women, parents are aware, but not enough are aware of what's actually being taught. I think there's an atmosphere of intimidation with schools having not just saying that there's such a thing, that some people believe that children can be transgender. Schools seem to be teaching it as fact and a belief that's necessary. And in some ways, I think we've had some progress in everybody being able to talk about it now. It's like it's now discussed in the BBC and on, in the pages of newspapers. It's acknowledged that there are different opinions. But what hasn't changed is the Scottish government's stance. It's just absolutely intransigent and not listening and not engaging with the very real concerns that there are, which I can say a bit about what I think the concerns are. If you
That
like.
would be great. Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, that
Right.
would be fantastic.
So in the article in the Herald, and I've repeated this elsewhere and worked, but in the first article, I said, my concern is not just for children who have gender dysphoria and who've just got hold of the idea that they might be in the wrong sex. I think some of that is not a clinical condition. In fact, as time has gone on and you've seen the exponential rise in the number of children in some areas, and it's patchy, that you can see there's a lot of social contagion and group thinking, not surprisingly, since children are being taught it in schools. But my concern's not just about those children, although my concern's about them and the kind of automatic so-called transitioning to live as if they're of the opposite sex. I think that's very dangerous for them, very worrying, and particularly as it puts them on a pathway to puberty blockers, there's a medical pathway that actually says, yes, if you have a transgender child, socially transition them, and then if it persists, which it's likely to, but if it persists, then, refer to the gender identity clinic or refer for help, and they can get given puberty blockers. And once you're on puberty blockers, there's a medical pathway that's almost automatic that you will then be given cross-sex hormones, and and then recommended for surgery to align your body to this idea that you could be in the wrong sex. So I'm concerned about those children greatly, but I'm also concerned about all children, because what all children are being told in schools and in social media and in all sorts of other places is that they might be in the wrong body. And also they're being told that their parents are wrong about their sex, and that the parents are old-fashioned or bigots or a problem, and that the school or whoever it is that's telling them knows better than their parents. Now, I think that to tell children that the evidence of their own senses is disputed, is not right, and that only a person can know what they really are inside, when nobody has, well, we've all been girls, and but you don't actually feel like a girl or a woman. You just know that you're you, and you have a female body, but you know that you're just yourself, and that involves you are partly your body. So your body is you're your body, but there's no feeling of being a woman as such. And women express being a woman, or women are women in many, many different ways. Some of us wear trousers all the time. Some of us don't wear makeup. Some of us are very, organized or bossy or whatever. And other people, are more, there's a whole range of ways, which, so there's no feeling of, I know there's that song, I feel like a woman, but whatever. I know. So I never feel like a woman. So I think it's a false idea to put in children's heads that they may have they may have been wrongly assigned at birth to a sex, and that there's something separate. In fact, the whole thing's so confused. You can't begin to tell people what this theory is or what these ideas are, because they're so crazy. They are literally incomprehensible, illogical. They confuse gender with sex all the time, and they keep swapping backwards and forwards. They've taken the terms girl, boy, man, and woman. Well, they don't really worry about men, but women, and they've perverted it beyond anything or made it meaningless, and they can't tell you what a woman is. And they're now beginning to say female, that you can have a female penis or a female, or a male vagina. In fact, I heard that so these are the prophets of this new religion or ideology are talk nonsense. So as far as I'm concerned, I cannot make sense of it. When you start telling people what it means, you can't make sense of it. And so I think so there's concern for all children, really, and there's concerns for parents who are trying to navigate all this and talk to their children about it, especially when they're not being supported by schools. Schools should be telling children that some people might believe that you can change sex or that gender separates from sex, but many people don't, and it's perfectly legitimate to believe either, and you should never bully anybody for believing one way or the other, and we should all be able to talk about it. And that's not what's being taught, and I think that's very dangerous for children. I'm not surprised to hear that children's mental health is reported to be declining. I mean, obviously there's been COVID and everything else, but I think one of teaching children in school this idea that reality is disposable or questionable, and that their parents and parental confidence and authority is so important in bringing children up. Not to, telling children that their parents are wrong and that it's unkind to believe certain things or wrong to say them is very, very dangerous.
How do you think the ideology got such a grip on the education system?
I really don't know. I mean, it really is very strange. I had a similar experience over the named person and the whole the government made.
Do you want to tell us what the named person
stuff was? It came in with the Children and Young Person Act of 2016. And basically, the government said that there would be a named person for every child from even pre-birth right through to 18. And what the controversial thing there was, the government was saying, and it's not a bad idea, but there's two things wrong with it. One was that there was no named person because the person was never named. It would just say your named person will be told this, that, the next thing. But the other thing was the government was saying this is for families, to support families, but actually it was about families. Families were not being helped and supported, if you want, in that. Sometimes they were, just because there's good teachers and there's good other people in the system that help families, and so they would be being helped. But it was actually a lot of recording of information and using information. So one of the really worrying things would be that right from the get-go, things were being written down about children, families not knowing about it. Their consent was dispensed with wrongly. And that's really why it foundered in the Supreme Court eventually. And that was because there is no way that parental consent is needed for the recording and sharing of information. And the named person whole project was predicated on no consent and just doing it. And in fact, so I was very concerned about that because I think that child protection, or what's called child protection, is not protecting children quite often, and that it's intrusive, that a lot of families are being put under surveillance, that it's very disturbing when you're accused of child abuse or told of suspicions of child abuse or child neglect, and your whole family gets given a going over. There's lots of research about this, about the impact on families and on parents of being subject to an investigation. And there's a Professor Andy Bilson, he has researched that, like, the numbers as well as the impacts, and so have other people. But the evidence is that a whole lot of families are given a going over, and that in 90% of cases, the caravan moves on, and they're never told they're exonerated, but the damage has been done because parents' confidence is totally shaken. The children get really worried, and there's a whole air of alarm, and no help is offered. So, you know, where is the help? There's less and less help, like family centres, Sure Start, all these things have gone or massively reduced. And what we have got is this massive sort of almost surveillance of families. And named person, I think, yeah, sorry,
I was
mate.
just going to say, no, there's common themes there across all of it, isn't there? Which is the lack of parental consent, because the guidance for transgender pupils is about not getting consent from parents, and about keeping them in the dark. And there's themes there around what you're saying about the kind of confidence that parents have in looking after their children, and how that's being undermined. So in fact, you're right, you can see all these parallels with different, and I suppose the other common theme amongst it all is the Scottish government's intransigence, as you say, in terms of, who is it that's actually saying this is the right way to go ahead? Let's go behind parents' backs. That's going to be a success. Who's giving them that advice?
Yes, I mean, I've seen some quite sinister conspiracy theories about, what might be going on or behind it, which is about data, and it's valuable to have a lot of data on people's lives and on, but I'm not so sure. But I do know that the Scottish government, even when they were told all the way through by the Faculty of Advocates, by the Law Society, by human rights lawyers and advice, that's a bit different to the gender thing, where human rights organisations seem to have lost their heads. But anyway, they were advised that this was contravened rights, the data protection regulations, and that it couldn't be done. It was and they just said no. And that's what I got all the time, was just people telling me I was really wrong because the intentions were good. And I was like, no, but you can have good intentions, but have you heard about the road to hell? It's such a well-known saying, but good intentions do not necessarily make good law. And if you write bad law or bad guidance, you get bad outcomes. So even accepting that the government's got good intentions, even on the gender thing, gender and sex, they want to just be kinder, progressive, or they want to flag up that they are, that they're a progressive, because this government, I think, is into gesture politics and saying, they're all for, getting filmed launching ferries that aren't ready, aren't seaworthy, or, or just having the grand gesture, but actually, meanwhile, like, the actual brass tacks of education and other things are being neglected. So, and I'm not saying that as somebody that's opposed to independence. I'm just don't think this government is taking us anywhere positive at all. And I don't think they are looking for independence either. But anyway, that's the government won't accept. And so with the Supreme Court on the named person, they were just like, as if the Supreme Court had got it wrong. Everybody's wrong except John Swinney. So, but what did worry me as well about that was that the Scottish courts had backed the whole thing right up to the hilt, right up to the top court. I think it's the inner court of court of session or something, right up to that level. Scottish judges were lickspittle, I think, because anybody could tell you that you cannot, without consent and without informed consent, gather and share information about people's private lives without their knowledge or consent. It's like, no, you can't do it. And yet they were not accepting that. And then he tried to get it. So on the gender thing, yeah, they just won't listen to any, and they won't respond to any concerns, which is, they don't even try to come up with a response. It's just this absolute ideological, this is the case, we will continue, we are doing this to be inclusive, we're doing this to be, and no doubt at all that there are such a thing as trans children, or the whole condition of being a different sex in your brain or mind to your actual body. So yeah, that's really worrying. Why education, social work's been captured, children's organisations like Aberlour, which it has been a Stonewall champion, but it's stopped being that now, I think. There was some publicity in the Times about them refusing an applicant to be a foster carer for them because she had gender critical views and said she would not be happy about supporting a teenage girl to have puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones or whatever. And that was considered her what do you call it, her vetting, her application was just terminated immediately after that. No, and it seems it was totally about that. So that was in the Times, and they have now, but it's not just Aberlour, Bernardo's, NSPCC, Children in Scotland has actually come out in response to and said that children of any age should be able to transition without their parents' consent, even socially transitioning. And yet there is the evidence, the Cass Review interim report very clearly said there isn't the evidence really to support even social transitioning, which has, I mean, it has an impact in itself because, you know, children are even socially transitioning in school. And I understand like there's little parties and celebrations for them when they do it. So it's like, oh, Jonathan is now, all right, let me introduce you to Janice or whatever. And everybody knew this child in their own actual sex and name. And sometimes the parents aren't told that this has happened.
Horrifying.
It is, absolutely. So why it's been accepted when it kind of contravenes every single principle of of safeguarding of children, things that we know, that nobody gets a free pass about, nobody gets told, oh, it's okay, you're above suspicion because you're a head teacher. We know that. You don't say, oh, he couldn't possibly, he's a policeman or he's a great dad. So we know not to just give people a free pass, that you should, if there's evidence that they're to be worried about, you don't give anybody a free pass. But on this issue, people are getting a free pass. Men are being allowed, men who are rapists and sexual offenders are given a free pass to be, if they say they're women, it's almost as if transition is transubstantiation or something, and they now become virgins and good people. And, you know, it's just as if by the very act of saying I'm a woman, you make yourself as untouchable as, a saint, or, you know. Yeah. So why that's happened, I don't know. And I wrote to the children, I did a briefing for the children's sector, just wrote it and published it, and wrote to at least one chief exec who I thought might be sympathetic, just saying, would she be prepared to have a meeting, call a meeting of other, you know, the policy and other people from the different charities to just discuss the concerns that I was putting on the table. And the response was, no, because I have to consider children's feelings. Well, I was considering children's feelings, and I'd actually written quite carefully about how I thought this would affect children's feelings. But I think what they meant was there's a number of children who are considered or call themselves trans who are being taken about to the Children's Commissioner's Office, or the Children's Commissioner's Office is taking them to various places, and these are then seen to be children who should never be challenged, and whose everything that they say they're being encouraged to believe should be done by the grown-ups, because that's otherwise they might kill themselves.
Children become untouchable as well in the schools.
Yes,
they can do what they like because they are also untouchable, as the same as the men that say they're women and get to a women's prison.
Right, that's interesting. I don't know so much about what was on in schools, and in fact, I would suggest that you might want to do one session specifically about what's going on in schools. I know a lot of parents are concerned about it, and Dr. Shireen Benjamin would be a good person for you to approach about that, because she knows what's going on in schools and has she herself has suffered for expressing her concerns about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. But has persevered and seems to be winning or at least the right to speak in her university.
So given that we've got this intransigence and we've got nobody really in positions of authority listening, what do you think is would be effective to kind of try and challenge some of this?
Well, some of us have set up an alliance, and we call it the Evidence-Based Social Work Alliance, and we have been challenging, we're a cross-UK group, so we've been challenging the regulator in England in particular. Social Work England allows social workers to register according to the sex that they claim to be, which I think is incredibly dangerous and wrong. And because, well, for obvious reasons, that somebody expects a female social worker to come and they get presented with somebody who's often quite obviously a man, or who confuses, you're confused and you're like trying to, because somebody actually it's Helen Joyce in her book Trans points out that for millennia, we know how to tell the difference between a man and a woman. And when the footsteps behind you are a man. I swim in the sea, and I know from like a wee dot in the sea swimming, I can tell whether it's a man or a woman. And it's not because they don't have a bathing costume on. It's just the show something about, really well. So we do know the difference between a man and a woman. And so you quite often, I'm prepared to acknowledge that there are some particularly young women, I think, who take testosterone and grow beards and everything, and they can't, and deep voices, and they can seem like young men. But men who've gone through puberty, and it's fairly obvious that they're men, and it's quite disturbing to be forced to say they're not, because women, we always need to know for our own safety whether it's a man behind you in the street or a man coming into the space that you're in. Not because all men are dangerous, but because some men are.
Yes.
And we don't know which ones.
Yes, exactly. How can you tell? And how can you tell that somebody, even if you believe in trans women and that they are all innocent or never would, sexually abuse or take advantage of the situation, even if you believe that, how are you supposed to tell the difference between a trans woman and a man? How do you tell? And how do children tell? Because that's the other thing I always told my children, that if they got lost, find a mum, find a mum with the children, or find a lady and go and tell the lady that you're lost, or go to the shop, whatever. Not because most men would do the right thing and help them find their mums and things, but just because they are those predatory men. But if children are being told that you can't tell the difference between a man and a woman, if somebody comes up to them who looks like a man but says, I'm a lady, I'm a man, I'm a woman, that parents are telling them to trust them.
That's the other thing I used to tell my children was, if any adults told them to keep a secret,
Yes.
the first thing they were to do was to tell me, because that meant you could tell your mum, but you can't tell anyone else.
Yes.
And then the schools are obviously now saying, oh, no, it's okay. Keep a secret from your parents. I think that's a huge red flag.
Absolutely. I mean, the talk that I gave at the For Women Scotland meeting was called Red Flags and Cross Bridges. And I think that's what we've seen, a whole just years of that now, of red flags being ignored and bridges being crossed that are going to be very hard for people to come back across. So in terms of Mary's question about what to do, I think we must, if you can, speak out in whatever way you can. And that's why we've set up the Evidence-Based Social Work Alliance, EBSWA. It's got a website and a Twitter thing, so people can find us on that. Because some people are actually threatened, their jobs would be threatened. We're supporting Rachel Mead, who's a social worker Social Work England have sanctioned for liking tweets and supporting tweets by Women's Place UK and Fair Play for Women and expressing concern about safeguarding. And she has been sanctioned, and her council have instituted disciplinary proceedings on that basis. So she's taking both of them to an employment tribunal. So I think resist, keep expressing the concerns. We always express our concerns in a professional way, in a respectful way, and looking for evidence, putting our evidence on the table, asking for evidence. We've not had much luck, although I have to say we had very good response from the SSSC in Scotland, where the senior managers, the chief executive and senior managers were absolutely clear that they knew the difference between sex and gender. They knew that sex was a protected characteristic, and that they would continue to collect their registration and to register people according to their sex. However, what they didn't know was that Disclosure Scotland was allowing people to disguise their sex and not for, so if they had convictions or in another name, I must be careful about what they were doing, but basically they were allowing people confidentiality about their sex.
Yeah.
And the SSSC were really very surprised about that. They didn't know it was happening. So we need to go and chase up what has happened about that, because clearly that's a big secret. I mean, why would you have a whole body designed to protect vulnerable people and children from predatory adults, and then allow people to disguise their real name, their real sex? And I think if they had convictions, they probably had to tell them. But actually, most people don't have convictions, but what they do have is a real name and a real sex that they're known by, so that other people could go, wait a minute, you know, that person was sacked, or that person was, the SSSC was notified that they had been under suspicion or something, because there is a duty on employers to tell. But if they've got a different name, how are you going to know? So, yeah. So we need to challenge all of those things and just keep going. I just think we will win. Sanity will reassert itself, or maybe some other crazy notion will come in, but so much damage is being done in the meantime. So I really think people should begin to speak up, talk to other people at work, and just actually start organizing in terms of groups, because one person can be picked off, even two people can be picked off, but the minute you call yourself, you're a group and you're organized and you're acting, that we're much less easy to pick off. Certainly none of the EBSWA members who are out as EBSWA have been subject to threats.
And also on that's a good resource that you've reminded us of, Maggie, and especially some of the threads that are done around child development and stages of child development and what we should be expecting from children. So it's a good resource to kind of back up your knowledge, isn't it? If you want to go and challenge things, it's always good to have
Right.
to be informed and to kind of have a grasp of what it is that you want to, and to know, because it's actually quite an emotional subject in many ways. And I think it's that bit about needing to kind of step back from that sometimes and to kind of think about, right, well, what is it I want to be saying here? What is it I want to say to the school? What are the things that, you know, what is there in law that can support me? What is there that, you know, in terms of evidence-based practice there is that can support me as well?
Yes, and that's EBSWA's mission, really, is to help people to find that evidence, to present the evidence, and it's all voluntary, and we're not doing as much as we would like, but we're doing it.
Great. Well, we're coming up to near the end of time. Is there any final questions you have, Anna, or?
No questions. I just want to say thank you.
Yeah. Anything you'd like to round up with, Maggie?
Well, just really, if there are parents listening, and whether they're getting grief or trouble from school or from social work, you should be absolutely clear that you and your child have a right not to believe. that people can change sex or be transgender, and that schools and social workers must defend your right to have those beliefs, and must protect children from being bullied for having them, being bullied by teachers who disagree, or by being ostracized at school by children who disagree. And that certainly it should not be an issue for child protection if a parent is refusing to accept or agree to the transitioning, social transition or otherwise, of their child, and is actually looking for a more comprehensive and holistic response to any child's distress. And that is their right, and they should always be clear in that. And if they need to further support on that, do contact EBSWA, just so we can provide them with that kind of support.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point, because actually, these beliefs are actually protected in law, and
Absolutely.
actually, schools perhaps need reminded of that if they are, silencing parents or silencing children even in schools. I mean, it's...
Yeah, I mean, I said EBSWA there, and I'm conscious actually there's much better and bigger organisations, so there's Transgender Trend, and in Scotland there's Safe Schools, Save Our Schools, SOS, which is doing great work. So there are loads actually of really good resources for people. So find them and use them, because it is a right to not be told what to think.
Well, that seems like a very good point to actually end on. So thank you so much, Maggie.
No, thank you. Thank you.
And maybe we'll have you back, because you've got loads of really good information there, and good good things to be chatting about. So and actually maybe you're taking the named persons to the Supreme Court is actually where this is all headed with the Gender Recognition Act. So
I hope so. It costs a lot of money. I mean, I didn't personally take them.
No.
I supported the campaign, but so I think that's where it might all end up. And
maybe that's a campaign we can all get behind if it actually
absolutely.
happens.
I'll march and speak for that.
Okay. Thanks so much for that.